Since we're talking about running backs and some of the deeper names at running back, Alex, I want to talk to you a little bit about and something that I really spent some time on after our Sunday's Finest draft. That's our home league. Are the running back handcuffs that also have some standalone value. You think of names like Kareem Hunt. You think of Zach Moss. Even other ones that I'll talk about here in a moment, like Chase Edmonds, Boston Scott, Justin Jackson. I'm really coming around to taking these guys over
Marlon Mack,
over the Alexander Madisons, over the Tony Pollards, over the Latavius Murrays of the world, because I want a guy that will become a top 16 option if the guy in front of him goes down, but I don't want a guy who's going to sit on my bench and put up 0 points for 4 weeks.
So there's other names in this category. I think Marlon Mack's in there. I think
Sure.
Philip Lindsay's in there. Tevin Coleman. There's a ton of names. And Steph, for me, it comes down to this. I love the strategy, and you're right, because if you have Tony Pollard on your bench for 4 weeks and Zeke isn't getting hurt, he's never missed a game due to injury in his entire career. Is
Sheesh.
Tony Pollard getting enough work to, like, if you need to drop somebody, you're going to drop the guy that's not doing anything, or you're just going to try to pawn him off to the Zeke owner. But for me, the big question is, it depends on what you're looking for this guy. If you're looking for an RB3 that you might have to plug in during bye weeks, you might have, he might be your first backup if someone gets hurt. In that case, I would lean towards a Marlon Mack. I would lean towards even a Boston Scott who's going to get some passing work. I would lean towards a Tevin Coleman. Guys that are at least going to get touches and not just be non-existent on the field. But to me, if you're looking for an RB4, which is strictly an upside shot, I would much rather have a Tony Pollard than a Marlon Mack, because barring injury, Steph, here's what I want to ask you. Of all these guys we just talked about, barring injury, which ones are you actually excited about playing on a week-to-week basis? Like, are there any of the names we just said that if they're your RB2, you're like, oh, this is great, I'm going to win my matchup this week? And to me, the answer is no. So to me, it's about you're just taking a gamble on which one is going to have the upside if an injury happens. And for me, that's Tony Pollard. But I'll kick it back to you. I want to hear what you have to say about some of these guys. I know you love Chase Edmonds, Boston Scott. What's your take on these guys, and in what situation would you want them on your bench?
And here's the thing, you threw out like Marlon Mack out there. I think we could talk about individual players. Like, I think his ADP is too high. I'm talking about guys that are super late in drafts that have upside to either take over as the one this year, or they're in committees where they could see some relevance. So in this league, it's a 14-team PPR league with keepers. My keeper was Devontae Adams. In the first round, I got Miles Sanders. Second round, I got Melvin Gordon. And this is a league where running backs go at a premium. Almost all the keepers are running backs. There's not a lot of guys available. So that's who I'm rolling with. At that point, it's like, am I going to reach on Ronald Jones, or I'm going to take DJ Chark? So I had to make that decision. I ended up going with Chark. And then there really weren't many running backs left. I got sniped on a few guys, got sniped on J.K. Dobbins, got sniped on James White. Maybe I should have reached up and taken one of those just to help me put together a little bit more of a robust running back strategy. But at that point, I said, well, screw it. I'm just going to wait. I'm going to scoop up a ton of other value at the other positions and then just get a haul in terms of these standalone value handcuffs, where in this weird, crazy COVID year, they could end up being the one on the depth chart at certain points throughout the season. But I know that in the right matchup, I could plug them in as well, and their value will increase. If Chase Edmonds comes out and he's getting limited touches, let's say he's being used as a change of pace back behind Kenyon Drake, and he's getting, let's say, 8 carries and a reception or 2 a game, that's still enough value that's there where, it's not just 0 points a week, 0 points a week, 0 points a week. I can plug him in a desperation move. Let's say Melvin Gordon goes down now and I don't have any other options. I could plug Chase Edmonds in a high-flying matchup. Let's say the Arizona Cardinals are playing the Atlanta Falcons. Well, then I can plug him in there because I think I can get something from him as opposed to a 0 that I'm going to get, or a 1 point that I'm going to get from a Tony Pollard or an Alexander Madison, who are really relegated to 0 if they can't get anything going. So in this league, I decided to hedge against my lack of depth at the running back position. And last year I did this exact same thing, and it ended up being a massive win when I was able to get Austin Eckler in like 3 different leagues, and kept me in, week out. But I got Zach Moss in the 8th. I got Boston Scott in the 9th. Again, this is a 14-team league. I did have Miles Sanders, so having Sanders there kind of helped make the decision for me on Boston Scott, but I probably would have taken him with or without Sanders just because I think he can be relevant in the right matchups with some of the unproven weapons that the Eagles have. And then I took Chase Edmonds in the 10th. All 3 of these guys have week-to-week starting potential in desperation situations in PPR leagues. Reports on Zach Moss is that he's going to be a big part of the offense, especially on the goal line in this Frank Gore role. I'm projecting him to be a touchdown vulture from Devin Singletary, and it takes some of Josh Allen's 9 rushing touchdowns from last season. Moss, I feel like, is an underrated prospect. He was the highest graded running back prospect per PFF since 2016. He can get it done in the passing game. I look at Boston Scott's stretch over the last 4 games in 2019 where he was the RB7, literally getting more receptions than Sanders in every single game, and he was there as the number 2 behind him. And then when Sanders went down, he had 3 touchdowns in half a game. So I love the PPR value. I love the handcuff value. And then Chase Edmonds. With how many plays this Cardinals team is going to run, with how much we expect this team to improve with Kyler Murray emerging, the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, I'm just trying to get my hands on pieces in this offense, and one of the cheapest ones is Chase Edmonds. You know I love Kenyon Drake, but I like Edmonds a lot as well. And before his injury last season, Edmonds was getting 5 to 8 carries and 2 to 3 receptions per game. Like that's enough to where if he's efficient in the right matchup, you can plug him in on a bye week if there's an injury, whatever it may be. His efficiency stats were very similar to Kenyon Drake's. He had 4 touchdowns, and with 3 of those coming on 1 week, which we also saw with Kenyon Drake. So there's also that boom potential where multiple touchdowns could come in. Edmonds was running at 5.1 yards per clip. Kenyon Drake was at 5.2. So both similar in that department. And when Edmonds was made the full-time starter, when David Johnson went down, he absolutely ate 27 carries, 126 yards, 3 touchdowns, some passing game work, a 35-point fantasy week. We've never seen Kenyon Drake play up to his ceiling for a full 16-game season. So I like Edmonds as this change of pace back, a guy who will see some efficient touches on an offense that's going to run a lot of plays. So that's where my love from Edmonds comes in. You can pretty much get him for free. The value is going to skyrocket if Drake goes down. So at RB52, I think you can do a lot worse than a guy like Chase Edmonds.
See, I disagree with you.
Really? Here's the only other thing I'll add.
I so strongly disagree with you.
Here's the only other thing I'll add.
I disagree with you.
I'll let you get into your disagreement, but Drake is on a 1-year deal. I think the Cardinals are going to see what they have with a 24-year-old still on his rookie contract who's shown some flashes.
Drake is on a 1-year deal because he's on the transition tag, and I'll pull it up, but do you know how much they're paying him this year? I'm pretty sure it's over $10 million. So they would not have kept him.
It's $8 million.
They would not have kept him on the transition tag if they weren't going to pay him, or they didn't want him to stick around and they didn't think he was going to be useful. So that, I mean, I think all the other stuff
signed a 1-year, $8.4 million deal with the Arizona Cardinals.
Okay, so that probably puts him in the top 10 at the running back position in the NFL. So here's why I disagree with you, because to me, I get the points about Chase Edmonds. I think if Drake goes down, he has value. Outside of Kenyon Drake going down, you are never going to start Chase Edmonds. Yeah, it's just not true. And every name you listed, Boston Scott, Chase Edmonds, who else did you talk about? You said Alexander Madison. Zach Moss. Okay, Zach Moss, I'll give it to you. I think Chase Edmonds and Boston Scott, there is no chance they win the starting job without an injury to the starter. Zach Moss is different. I think Zach Moss could potentially actually get more workload than Devin Singletary this year by talent. Now, with Chase Edmonds and Boston Scott, there is no way they're taking over the role from a talent perspective. The only way they're taking over that role is due to an injury, which is exactly what you're shooting for with a Tony Pollard, with a Latavius Murray, with an Alexander Madison. So to me, I just don't see the upside there, because Tony Pollard had as many good games as Chase Edmonds did last season. Tony Pollard had more rushing yards per game than Chase Edmonds last season. Pollard had 200-yard games, had a couple 20-plus point fantasy weeks, and Chase Edmonds really had 3 good games all season. Tony Pollard had 2 good games all season. So to me, it's like trying to roll out one of these guys and try to project which matchup the backup is going to get touches and score touchdowns is impossible. You're just praying for a miracle at that point. And to me, the only way you're ever going to start any of these guys is if the starters go down. Now, the one thing that Chase Edmonds has in his favor is that I think Kenyon Drake is probably more likely to get hurt than Zeke, and that's just, neither are super injury prone, but Zeke has been a consistent bill of health his entire career. But for me, give me Tony Pollard, give me Latavius Murray, those guys over at Chase Edmonds. I think they're going to clog your bench the same way, and you're going to be unhappy with those guys unless they have the starting role. I just can't imagine them as anything other than handcuffs this year. Now, Boston Scott had the stretch to end last season, so Boston Scott you know, I think his upside is lower than Tony
Here's the
Pollard,
thing.
but I still am not going to feel good about starting Boston Scott in my RB2 spot.
And I totally see some of those points. I can see those as reasons why you fade these guys. What I'm doing at this point is I'm just taking shots. I
sure.
want to get these low-end running backs that could explode because we see guys emerge every single season. We saw DeAndre Washington come in at the end of last season and have some monster games with the Raiders. With these guys, though, yes, they're all upside plays, but I also am trying to add some depth at the same time. I think, yes, they're going to be guys that I'm not starting on a weekly basis. That's not where I'm drafting them or expecting them to be. I just like getting that mid-round running back depth because I feel pretty good at least one of those guys popping off and giving me at least a streamable option week to week in desperate situations. So it's less about the upside. Tony Pollard, yes, every day of the week.
I think we both agree on wanting to take double-digit round upside shots on these running backs. I think the thing we're disagreeing on is, to me, Alexander Mattison, Tony Pollard, Latavius Murray, Boston Scott, Chase Edmonds, Zach Moss, Justin Jackson even. All these guys, to me, are in the same category. These are all just deep shot handcuffs that you're hoping something happens and they get the starting job and they have tremendous value. Because every name I just listed, if the starter was to go down, they're a top 16 running back. To me, they're all the same. I don't think you can really say with any kind of logic that one is going to be more valuable than another on a week-to-week basis because they just pop off on random times. Like Chase Edmonds, outside of the week where he was like quote-unquote starting last season, had 2 good games all season. Same for Tony Pollard. They happened at weird times. They both had great matchups throughout the season. Sometimes it was 100 yards and a touchdown. Sometimes it was 3 carries for 12 yards. And I get what you're saying. You're not drafting them there. But to me, I think the only thing we're disagreeing on is I think they're all the same. And one thing I do think we also agree on is I'm taking every name we just listed over Marlon Mack, over Tevin Coleman, over Phillip Lindsay, because to me, Lindsay, Mack, and Tevin Coleman, if the starter or the other guy sharing the backfield goes down, I think they have tremendous value, but they're probably like a top 20 option, a solid RB2, where with all the names we're talking about here in this deep handcuff tier, if the starter goes down, they're probably vaulting into that top 16 range, potentially RB1 range. Like Tony Pollard, Alexander Mattison, and Latavius Murray, I think me and you both agree, even Chase Edmonds, maybe even Boston Scott, agree if the starter went down, they'd be an RB1. And with some of those names that are like, okay, they get some work now, but if the starter went down, they'd have value. I think they're like Marlon Mack. If Jonathan Taylor, something happened and it was just Marlon Mack, you're getting the Marlon Mack from last year, which was like a solid RB2. So I think, we agree on we'd rather take shots on names like this than some of the other guys that are just kind of like meh in the middle rounds. But I think what we're disagreeing on here is I see them all as the same. I love Pollard, Madison, and Latavius Murray as the top 3 of this group. Edmonds is somewhere in the middle. But outside of Zach Moss and maybe Boston Scott, I see all these guys as just deep stashes that are going to clog your bench regardless.
I'm telling you, man, I know it's a hot take. Edmonds is going to be nasty.
We'll see.
He's going to get work with Drake in the lineup. He's going to get work with Drake in the lineup. You're telling me when they switched from the air raid over to this more like run raid once they brought Drake in, if the run raid is working for them, like they can't give Kenyon Drake 30 touches a game, but they can give him 18 and they can give Edmonds another 12 to 15, some through the air, some on the ground. He might get the touchdown that week. So it's more for me. I'm just like, yeah, why can't I have the handcuff and then get a little bit of I want the cake and I want to eat it too. So give me some standalone value. But I love the disagreements, man. Guys, let us know what you think down in the comments. If you like what we're doing here, give us a sub and a like. Let's keep it going.